Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our webinar, From Good Law to Great Law, Building a Culture of Business Development and Distinctive Client Experience. My name is Rachel Klepp-Miller. I'm the Director of Digital Engagement for GrowthPlay. Thank you again for joining us. And in a minute, I will turn it over to our presenters, Deb Knupp and Jim Durham, both who are really passionate about building great law.
So greetings all. If we find any of you on the East Coast, we hope that the snow and this very late or mid-spring blizzard is not keeping too many of you from productive days. We're so delighted you've joined us. And at a very high level, Jim and I are going to walk you through 4 essential insights regarding how high-performing firms are doing relative to great law and client experience. Secondly, we're going to spend some attention and intention around transforming culture from a business development culture and a client experience culture. We'll also speak to a great deal of insight and research that we've been doing at GrowthPlay on how law firms are moving from a state of good law to a space that we call great law, and ultimately want to give you some tactical insights, particularly around core innovation, and we'll give you 6 pillars of excellent client experience. So before we dive into some of the key insights, we're going to start with my screen is going to advance here in a moment. We're going to start with a quick poll. So on your screens, if you'll click, what do you find right now as the biggest pain points that you're facing in your current role? And we invite you to select any of the options that apply. So we're going to pause for a moment to give all of you an opportunity to give your input on what are some of the biggest pain points that you're currently facing in your role. And then once we've gotten a number of you who contributed, you'll see in a minute the results of your polling. Jim, I love this digital part of webinars where we have opportunities for participants to give us their feedback real time. So this is certainly a far evolution as we've seen. So here are the results. So as I'm looking at this, it looks like close to half of you are experiencing some pain point with regards to follow through. And I would say that's not at all a surprise to us. As we think about engaging in business development and client experience, sometimes it's not the point of initiation that's a challenge. It's how do you keep people engaged well beyond the initial effort. We also see high numbers with regards to apathy or a lack of lawyer engagement. And again, Jim and I are going to speak specifically about what may be behind that lack of engagement and more concretely what you can do to elevate it.
That's exactly right, Deb. And one of the things I'm noticing here is that what you're struggling with is consistent with our topic today. It's really getting lawyers to see things differently and to feel more authentic in what they do, which leads to more follow-through and more engagement. So I think we're addressing the right issues for you all today.
That's great. So to give you a bit of a background on what we're learning, using the voice of the client research that we do and aggregating the insights from many reputable research organizations on what buyers of legal service are telling us. And so to hit a few of these at the highlights, first and foremost, we all know that we've come into an era where having high-quality legal service and having great technical expertise has become a table stake. And yet many buyers of legal service communicate that when law firms are engaging them, particularly around business development, quality and technical expertise continue to be highlighted or showcased as a differentiator. Buyers tell us that it really is the ticket for entry. To that end, we're also seeing a major shift in client loyalty, and in fact, testing of client loyalty based on failure to execute some really fundamental client service principles. Some recent statistics many of you may have seen is that 60 to 80% of existing legal work is up for grabs. When buyers are asked, would you be receptive to engaging or focusing on a new firm? 60 to 80%. Now, if you're in an active business development mode, that's great. That says that clients are maybe open to hearing more about what you have to offer. It should also, though, give us, many of us, a pause, realizing that our clients may be among those statistics of 60 to 80%. Now, a third important insight is the recognition that clients have really elevated at a fervor pitch of wanting to make sure that people know their business and know by their business the plea for communicating both the consulting part of the work in the business as well as the legal service. We've also seen that sales pitches often feel like a real sea of sameness, and in fact, we believe that 50 to 55 minutes of an average sales pitch are very often used by pitching law firms to communicate their representative expertise or their capabilities, and most law firms are pitching in a similar way. It's the firms that depart from the sea of sameness that tend to see the greatest potential and greatest opportunity. Another insight that many of you may know firsthand is that we're in a competitive selling environment. And in fact, relying on history and tradition is no longer enough to have predictable or sustainable revenue. And in fact, when it comes to closing the deal, we have found that there are multiple opportunities to ask your client or prospective client to engage you in permission to keep building a relationship until such time as you get an opportunity to do billable work. And in fact, some statistics suggest it takes 7 to 14 yeses before such time as a client is ready to engage your firm in a billable work or a billable project. 7 to 14 touch points or permissions to engage. And in practical reality, many lawyers and law firms stop trying after 2 tries. Ultimately, the goal of any conversation that you're having with clients or prospective clients in the form of a pitch is that you realize that it simulates client experience. And Jim and I have heard countless stories about how firms have stepped into a pitch environment. They've simulated so much fantastic experience in that pitch that in some cases, buyers of legal service have communicated while they may not hire the firm for that initial project, many have articulated, man, I can't wait till we get sued again, so as to invite that firm back to further conversation. So as we ground ourselves in today's discussion, some of these insights are really designed to awaken why it is so important to pay attention to our culture and our client experience. With that, Jim's going to share a few more insights with regards to some recent research that many of you may have seen with the BTI study.
Hey everyone, since I'm not going to follow every bullet that is about to appear on your screen anyway, I will start by saying that what high-performing firms are doing could actually be the subject of a day-long seminar. As you can imagine, BTI has provided some good guidance in their most recent Outlook report, and their experience is consistent with ours. And so what I thought I'd do was pull some common themes from this. First, the overall making extraordinary client service a firm-wide priority is what the top performing firms are doing, period. It is truly recognized that there are abilities to differentiate in the client experience more than almost anywhere else in a firm's activities. Everyone, however, says they have a focus on extraordinary client service. What we're going to talk about today is what some of the specific things firms are actually doing to differentiate in that regard. So this sort of breaks down into metrics, collaboration, pricing, and feedback if you look at each of these. The metrics are an amazing new development for all of us. If you look at big data at one end of the spectrum where you can literally break down every detail of everything that's happening in your firm and in your marketing efforts, and at the other end of the system are the old measures, the way you just look at where did this client come from? I don't know. Anecdotally, I know. I have worked with many firms to simply get them to add that question to the intake form. Where did this client come from? Give 3 options and actually just say pick one. Don't make it a hard question, but you know what? Firms truly resist that. It's one more administrative nightmare, they claim. Anyway, that's the kind of thing we need to be thinking about. What can we be doing in the area of metrics to be smarter about our marketing and about the way we manage our firm? Collaboration is really the second area that these converge into. That means client team management. That means lawyers having service skills so they can collaborate with each other and the clients. And it means being willing to pilot with key clients without having the answers every time. I presented to an in-house law group one day and at the end said, how would you feel about your lawyer calling up and saying, we do a lot of work in this area, but we're not sure exactly whether we got the billing right for you and whether we're delivering what you want, and say, could we work on this together? And the client said, I would love that call. I've never gotten it. Simple point. You just collaborate with the client, and we've seen 30% growth, by the way, in client relationships that are actively managed versus an average of 3% growth for clients that are just business as usual. Pricing sort of speaks for itself. Most firms have advanced to the pricing area and are willing to do some risk sharing, but you cannot be complacent about pricing. Most recently, I was looking at some RFPs for a client. They all said we're willing to try any alternative fee you may wish to discuss. Every RFP says that. What you need to say is these are the areas in which we've applied alternative fee approaches and how they have benefited the client. That's a game changer, and yet most sea of sameness, as Deb said, most don't do that. Finally, this comes down to feedback. Obviously, everything we talk about can be addressed through client feedback. Talking to a client about what's important to them, what's working, what's not working, etc. We'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a moment.
We'd like to ask you another quick polling question. So as you examine the ways that you're helping your lawyers be more strategic, share with us how and what you're doing to be more, how you're helping your lawyers be more strategic about their business development efforts and revenue growth. And again, please select all that apply. And then once we've gotten some tabulation, we'll be able to give you all some insights as to where this audience is seeing different techniques and strategies and tactics and really helping lawyers elevate and be more strategic about their business development and revenue growth. So, you know, Jim, I love when we can use data. You know, earlier one of the quick poll points was this idea of apathy or lack of engagement. And while we're waiting for this poll to tabulate, I want to just give all of you a strong encouragement that one of your best tactics can absolutely be sharing of data about what market research says. So what a delight to see that 75% of you are engaging in training and coaching. And we find that the smartest in-house business development, professional development resources, pricing resources are really recognizing that a big part of helping lawyers be more strategic is really around training and coaching. We also see that a number of you are beginning to elevate your game around some of the typical or traditional sales constructs. So as we start to think about lead tracking, pipeline management, account management, and again, it's great to see 42% are engaging in client feedback. And so as we move into the next part of our discussion today, this will be a great opportunity to really highlight how you all can assist your lawyers and your practice groups with the training and coaching and a number of these modalities to really elevate the game. So let's talk a little bit now about changing the mindset to transform culture.
And we need to thank our good friends at HBR Consulting for some good work here, because they're going to share with we're going to share with you some of their findings, which are really important at the high level. The top 3 factors for successful innovation and change are, you'll see the word innovation at the top there. Frankly, that is a greatly misunderstood word, and it's one that can scare people because it seems like it has to mean some magic moment, when in fact innovation best is just an incremental improvement. It's solving a known problem. That's truly innovation. It's just avoiding the status quo. And so when HBR looked at the influences on innovation, the first was having the right culture. The second was the willingness to challenge norms, basically take risk. And the third is having visionary business leaders. As you could imagine, those sound right, but indeed they're not in alignment many times with the normal operating rhythm within a law firm. There are a lot of operational aspects to our firms that favor the status quo. And that means we have to start thinking about changing the KPIs, the key performance indicators, from just incremental improvement in realization or revenue or profitability in specific areas to something greater. And one of the things I want to share is that in this area, having an environment where it is safe to suggest new ways of doing things is really the culture they're referencing at the top. It's actually also learning from mistakes. HBR calls it the black box theory, which means that when an aviation incident happens, is that the black box isn't to find guilt or fault, it's to find out what happened so that it will never happen again. With each thing we experience in our firm, when a client leaves, when a bill doesn't get paid, when a prized employee leaves. We need to be looking at why did that happen and how could we change it. That's innovation. Also in the area of what stops innovation in addition to the operating rhythm is usually there are limited resources, there's a low risk tolerance, and ultimately there's a need to manage consensus. So that's why the leaders piece is so critical. We'll talk more about that as we move through here, but visionary leaders at some firms I've worked with are literally having their firm invest in products and software that will affect the lawyers' lives, but they know it's necessary to protect the firm long term. There's lots of examples of that, but what you need to understand is that getting improvement in each area of client experience is really innovation.
We have an opportunity to give you a sense of some of the underlying philosophies, particularly the philosophies that Jim and I get to see that define great business development culture.
Yeah, and the first one is a word that was not floating around 10, 12 years ago when I was consulting previously. People weren't talking about authentic relationships, and I think that impacted the lawyer's willingness to participate in the process. Since I've come back and joined this fabulous group here at GrowthPlay about 7 months ago, what I've heard and seen in the market is that the lawyers are open to and welcoming of the idea of authentic relationships. In every training program I've ever done, the advanced question is what keeps you from doing more business development? One is time. The other answer always is I don't want to look like a salesperson. When you're managing and developing authentic relationships, treating clients as if you truly do care about them as people and friends, it opens up a whole new world. So that's one thing that's really critical. And so that's good that you're doing coaching, because that comes out of coaching and teaches them that it's an active service, not an active sales. In terms of other-centered solutions to problems, really what this means is taking the time, invest time in getting to know the client. The personally and professionally and the company, you do research, you find unmet needs, and you actually invest non-billable time in helping the client find ways to make money, save money, look good, or sleep better. That is the definition of value for every client I've ever spoken to. And then ultimately, doing things right. It's important, determining success as much by how you do it as opposed to just what you do. You can have lots of activities and you need activities, but it's how you execute on those activities that separates the high-performing firms and the high-performing lawyers from others. For example, it doesn't help to have a terrific, quote, communication program if in fact you're communicating in the wrong way. How you communicate matters, not just having a communication program. Having a client feedback program is an activity, but if you're defensive or using it as a sales meeting rather than a feedback meeting, the how makes it miss the mark. And you could think of, in many examples, what activities are you pursuing in the business development world? How are you executing those, and how might you do them better?
So as we begin to think about some practical ways that you may want to engage creating the right BD culture mindset, we offer this construct called Be, Do, Have. And to bring this to life, if you'll focus your attention on the word have, many business development initiatives are very keen on driving and generating revenue. And we want to say with total confidence, having more revenue, having business growth is absolutely an essential part of driving sustained culture. The challenge is, though, that when firms put all of their attention around having revenue growth or having quick revenue growth, it has a way of influencing the doing or the activity, and in some cases for less than honorable or less than productive outcomes for sustainability. I think of when you put your attention on having, it's like crash dieting. And if you've ever tried to lose weight in a quick period of time, you know that you're prone in a crash diet to do things that ultimately are not sustainable. And like any bad crash diet, not only do you not sustain weight loss over the long term, in many cases you may gain more weight than you even began with. And so part of creating the right BD culture is not to do BD crash dieting. And moreover, start the cultural mindset by engaging who are we? What are the values? What are the behaviors? What do we want to be known for? So that it will inform the doing of activity, and then the having of results has a way of taking care of itself. And so at the crux of building a great law firm is not to simply get stuck and the having of revenue and doing activity to get there, but moreover, starting with the being in a BD mindset of engaging in authentic relationships, being other-centered in problem solving, and ultimately being oriented to how, not just what. So let's talk a little bit about good law to great law as we move into some realization. So if I could see a show of hands, which unfortunately webinars don't afford us, I would venture to guess how many of us are absolutely saturated with negative headlines. The ongoing speculation, that this recognition that there's a lot of playing not to lose, and that there's a lot of insights on the future of law, whether it's big, large, mid, boutique, small, or solo. And as we think about firms in the space of moving to a cultural mindset that drives business and ultimately drives better client experience, is we have to neutralize this negativity with a greater optimism that focuses on what does it look like to be great. So instead of focusing on good law, what does it look like to be great law? You know, as we look at great laws about great business and in thinking about some of the old law and economics, again, many firms continue to have an over-propensity around productivity or profits per partner and operating with a very silo or scarce mentality, which is really the play not to lose style of engaging. Whereas many firms that are embracing this cultural mindset of Be Do Have are shifting their attention into being a great law firm, which is a focus on scalability. So not just the individual productivity, but how do we scale and build sustainability in our economics? How do we start to focus on things like client mix and profitability, putting a much higher attention on talent retention? And ultimately, the end game is about playing to win. It's about going as far as we can with what we have. Now, when you look at the games of playing to win versus playing not to lose, there's a real challenge in that the score of those games can be identical. The question is what's left over at the end. And so as you're thinking about culture and building a cultural mindset, firms that embrace a playing to win mindset, one that's identified by collaboration and teaming, focusing on engagement, tend to have a culture of abundance. And I want you all to know this is alive and well. Many firms of all different sizes are recognizing that the good law or old law mechanisms of doing business stand in a paleness of comparison to embracing great law economics and a cultural mindset of being before doing and doing before having. Now, one of the cornerstones is something called the triple bottom line. My guess is that some of you may have encountered the triple bottom line if you've done any study or focus on what's happening around social innovation. Great law firms are universally embracing that profitability is not just a measure of finances, but moreover, there are 3 ways to look at profitability. Now, if you take away nothing else from our webinar, we hope that this will help you elevate your cocktail party conversation prowess and that you can describe an awareness that true triple bottom line profitability looks first and foremost at, is this the firm where most profitable clients want to buy? So the financial metric is essential. And are we also the firm where the most talented people want to work and where the most inspired leaders want to serve, want to have an impact on greater communities? So as we're thinking about what it means to be a great law firm, one of the ways to engage in a cultural mindset shift is to begin facilitating discussion regarding these 3 measures of profitability. And as you begin to put attention on this, you'll be greatly surprised at how much more value can be generated in all 3 areas that have a way of symbiotically influencing each of those key spaces. So as we think about great laws about the triple bottom line, our hope is, again, you can start to engage in something that is far more innovative by looking beyond just financial measures. Now, great law is also about great innovation.
And that is where I started before by saying that we needn't think of innovation as coming up with the greatest technology and having ways to do things with technology that, frankly, you can do now. Some firms are doing that, and I've given you an example of that. But really, core innovation starts with the client experience, and that's really what our call is all about here today. The idea that we can have 6 touch points, 6 areas of client experience, each of which we're probably good at, but each of which could likely be improved. And if you think of innovation as solving a known problem or improving a known system to the benefit of the client, and not thinking of it as the more radical, reinvention, then you have a lot to take away from this today. And so I'm just going to walk through each of these at a high level, and then Deb's going to give you some more specific examples. Let me paint a visual here. Instead of 6 pillars, if you thought of these as 6 square boxes, and within each box was a graph, those of you who have financial experience or background know there's one rule about a financial graph. It should always be moving up and to the right. If not, something is probably wrong. We believe the same thing is true in each piece of the client experience. If in the first pillar of authentic relationships, you have people doing a good job, people investing a little time in a client relationship, being authentic by touching them in ways that matter, that's good. What could you do to move that graph up and to the right? Just a little bit better, and suddenly be the only firm doing that in your client experience. And Deb will talk about some of those. The second pillar, obviously, is knowing the client's business. In every client interview I've ever done, over 160 so far, and I've read many other client interview reports, the first answer to the question, why do you work with this firm? They're really responsive and they really know my business. Every single time. That should tell us something. If there's ways in which you can improve the way your lawyers and your firm know the client's business, are you reading what they read? Are you asking them what they read and reading it? That's just one of the many examples, and Deb will share some more, and we're obviously happy to talk about any of these offline. You can tell we're passionate about it. The communications, whatever communication plan you have with clients, it's probably fine, but have you checked in with them to see if there are ways in which you can improve communication? You want to move communication up and to the right. Appreciation. I have worked with hundreds of firms as a consultant, and dozens personally in other regards. It's not something that's top of mind. Lawyers tend to say thank you once in a while for a new matter. We need to be thinking specifically about being the only firm that really makes a client feel appreciated. And I have heard in client interviews, they say they take us for granted. That's something you never want to hear. Second to penultimate pillar, client feedback. Can't say enough about it. It's truly the holy grail. Imagine if every client if you talk to your top 50 clients and each one said, here's why we work with you, here's why we work with others, here's why we would work with you less, and here's how we might work with you more. That's actually achievable. That is an amazing experience, and it happens in every interview I've ever seen, read, or done. And then finally, the billing and budgeting process. Taken for granted in so many firms that we get it out on time. Seems like it's mostly accurate. Most recently, I was talking to an in-house lawyer who said, sometimes I change firms because my accounts payable people complain about the difficulty of paying a law firm. All things being equal, the work's about the same. If my accounts payable person is grumbling about it being hard to pay you, I'm going to use another law firm. It's not complicated. That's the kind of thing you have to bring the voice of the finance people into this process. Where are the pain points? Where are they struggling with clients? And Deb will talk a little bit about each of them.
Yeah, before we move to the specifics, I want to encourage all of you from a coaching and training perspective. If you wanted to elevate the game in your culture inside of your firms, helping lawyers get their arms around these 6 areas, helping them reflect and measure and assess how are we doing against these 6 core areas can often reveal some very low-hanging fruit that really points to core innovation. And when you live this foundation of core innovation, it builds the basis to do things that are more disruptive and more reinventive. And so we're going to share with you in some of our closing time today some specific tactics that are already being implemented and are delivering fantastic results. So let's talk first about some best practices around authentic relationship investment. Well, we should all understand that when it comes to relationship building, there is a fine line between staying connected with your clients and stalking them. And so one of the important highlights or tactics that we see work really well is to consistently look for authentic reasons to invest in your client relationships in a way that your clients would find authentic and welcome. There are typically 3 N's that you can leverage in engagement around client experience that allow you to engage your clients in inviting them to things they want to attend, introducing them to people they want to meet, or sharing insights or information that help advance their capabilities or business acumen with their key stakeholders inside of their companies. So a part of having a plan for authentic relationships is recognizing if we don't have an authentic reason that would be measured as valued by the client, then we need to rethink our engagement. The 3 N's often give us some creative ways to do this in a way that's incredibly welcome. Another key best practice. We're starting to see more and more lawyers engage their clients in new places and spaces. So instead of relying on typical conference rooms or in an environment where you would find a kind of a standard in the offices, we're starting to see more creativity and how people are having new experiences. So having meetings to conduct business conversation in creative spaces like behind-the-scenes tours in arts venues or sports venues. There are a number of creative things. A few others, again, just to highlight, we are starting to see more authentic relationship investment in how we're engaging in shared relationship building or shared education experiences. One of the great ways your lawyers can get more mileage with their clients is spend time with them doing activities that create a shared benefit for both parties. And absolutely, the co-authoring and co-leading. We're beginning to see more and more buyers of legal service tell us how much they appreciate when their law firms invest in the relationship by helping invest in their personal brands. So as we move now to the next pillar, which is the pillar of business counsel, Jim highlighted this idea of do you know my business? And again, many of you have invested quite a bit in the areas of market research and market intelligence. A great way to test for understanding with your lawyers is to quiz them on their facility of the 3 C's, asking them to articulate some of the high priorities at the company level or at that company's competition level or with the company's customers. Having the insights on company, competition, and customers allow you to have a much greater, more fulsome way of engaging in business counsel while you're delivering legal service. Many of you spend time at the work settings of your clients. We're seeing more and more lawyers shadow clients in their day-to-day work, whether that's attending meetings or simply making a site visit. Many of our client law firms are making it a requirement to have regular and routine scheduled site visits such that lawyers can continue to develop a sense of business acumen by being in the space. Nothing is greater for business counsel than participating in the client's trade or industry conversations, whether it's reading their periodicals or attending conferences. And one of the great ways to elevate client experience is spend time engaging with your clients' other service providers. We see these sometimes as potential alliance partners and can go a long way not only in serving the client more readily, but also in potential engagement for future referrals. So business counsel, again, is that second pillar. As we move now to the third pillar, we want to talk about some of the communication activities. Jim spoke a bit about how the ability to kind of recheck in to ask yourself, are we communicating with our clients in a way that drives trust and loyalty building so that we can create an immunity for that 60 to 80% of work that may be up for grabs? Are we engaging in project management fundamentals? Again, most of the people that we engage are recognizing that simply just doing legal work without the structure of project management is a recipe for drop balls and missed expectations. So again, thinking with your lawyers, are they applying some of those fundamentals on a routine or regular basis? Certainly to that end, not only is there timeline and deadline engagement, but are you asking your clients about communication preferences? One of the questions we ask when we conduct client interviews is we ask buyers of legal service, do you have a preference for how you receive communication? Do you have a preference for how you like to engage in communication activity? 100% of the people we ask the question communicate a preference. When we follow on and say, how many of your law firms ask you about your preferences or are actively engaging you in your preferences? Less than 10% of law firms are actively engaging clients around their preferences or modalities. So again, low-hanging fruit for core innovation is to be among that 10% that simply organize or orient communication activities around the client's way. So you've got some people who like email, some people like phone, many clients are liking the text, Some people prefer face-to-face. Others are huge users of Skype or FaceTime. Having your communication plans with that flexibility gives you a chance to be a one-size-fits-one and not simply develop a one-size-fits-all or a one-size-that-fits your own preferences. Clearly, communication also is about driving an understanding of what are the hot-button issues, who are the key players, how do we develop an understanding of their priorities, building in a more routinized cadence for communication, and to that end, when you can understand what your client's end goals are, goals, dreams, desires, you can often elevate trust and loyalty, not just by providing high-quality legal service, but by being an asset and an ally in advancing the professional goals of your clients or the personal dreams that they may have. All right, fourth pillar. Let's move to the next one now. Let's talk about client appreciation. I can assure you, if you do nothing different out of this webinar but to pay more attention to gratitude, you will absolutely outbehave your competition. As Jim highlighted, one of our biggest insights is clients telling us how they feel taken for granted. And when we think about gratitude, sometimes just the simplicity of saying thank you and then saying thank you again, that will raise the bar in elevating your client relationship. We're also seeing handwritten notes are making a comeback. You know, it's when old school becomes new school. And often those handwritten notes that express gratitude often end up in the atta-girl and atta-boy files of clients and ways to hold on to them. We've seen client appreciation elevate in how you're marking milestones. And again, the milestones need to match the client's preferences. Not everybody loves to get a birthday message, or not everyone wants to be recognized on an anniversary. But more and more, we're seeing lawyers make a huge impact on gratitude and appreciation when you're dialed in and tuned into key milestones. One of my favorite insights is the story of a lawyer who recognized the adoption or addition of a new pet by sending a client an appreciation gift called the Bark Box. And every month, this small box with pet treats and pet toys showed up on the desk or showed up in the mail for this particular client, and they were overwhelmed by how tuned in that lawyer was to their personal desires and personal interests. Also, in a space where spending a lot of money on gifts and expensive dinners are really beginning to shift to the wayside, particularly around ethics and other rules, sometimes investing just time and talent in the charitable or pro bono interest can be a fantastic way to demonstrate gratitude, which could also include social time, specifically if you invest time with the clients and the people that matter to them. So client appreciation is not just simply just saying thank you, but it's operationalizing your gratitude in a way that's personalized to your client's preference and to their interest. And then a final thought as we move to the final pillar is in this space, or sorry, the second to the last pillar, excuse me, is in the space of client feedback. We're seeing more and more firms are really investing time. It was pleased to see that over 40% of you in the poll earlier are realizing that client feedback is something that is requisite in really keeping tuned in. A couple of insights or best practices. If you all are engaging in the client feedback conversation, pay attention to the questions that you're asking. One of the ways that we see positive outcomes is when you ask your clients, when we're at our best, what does that look like, and how can we be at our best more often? Sometimes when you put too much attention on asking your clients for negative feedback, sometimes you elevate that negative experience and that negative memory in a way that's unintended. Also, having the opportunity to seek the market insight or perspective, we're seeing more and more law firms invite clients into the research and development and innovation process. All right, now the final pillar, which is in billing and fee care, is are we engaging properly with expectation management? Single biggest pinch point that we hear is when clients feel that they're surprised. And often they're surprised when they get bills that they weren't expecting. A great creed to live by is that it's better to give your client upsetting information early than to delay that information or communication, surprise them, and then tick them off. It's important to know that in the social science of expectation management, when a human being feels ticked off, it takes up residence in our brains like betrayal, and it lasts a whole lot longer than upset. So it's better to equip your lawyers on how to communicate these expectations early and often, particularly as you exercise early warning communication, alerting your client that a budget may be missed or that there's an over-utility based on facts or circumstances of a particular case. We've started to see more and more lawyers proactively offer to do budgeting. Again, as Jim highlighted earlier, the days of welcoming conversations around budgeting or AFAs, to simply welcome it is not enough. To be truly distinct in creating client experience, one must be proactive in discussing budgets, even when the client's not asking for it. And in some cases, elevate your standard to a no surprises billing standard. We have a law firm, a very innovative law firm that we work with, that has instituted this standard that clients will never ever be surprised by the bills they receive. And they've instituted a communication standard which says they do pre-bill previews, particularly when a bill is going to be something that could surprise the client. It's surprising that by instituting that pre-bill preview, they've been able to head off multiple instances of client anger, and in some cases have been able to negotiate full payment of a bill or an invoice simply by changing the parameters of invoicing. Also, helping your clients engage their key stakeholders with expectation setting or resetting as it may be, so that ultimately we can celebrate success. So as you think about these 6 pillars, and as you look at some of these concrete tactics, our hope is that you can participate more fully in the innovation game by realizing that innovation begins with core innovation around client experience. So with these thoughts in mind, and before we conclude our time together, Jim, would love to just get your thoughts or reflections as you think about your work as an in-house CMO, as you look at some of the greatness that you've seen inspired, having worked with some of the most innovative law firms in the country. When you look at these 6 pillars, any reflections or thoughts that we can add before we transition now to a time of Q&A?
Thanks, Deb. One thing I've noticed is that there is a lot of information floating around out there that confirms everything that we've said today, and many of you may say you've heard it. And for those of you who are willing, I think that the most important thing I can suggest is that you take some risk yourself and you be the person who brings to the attention of management and leadership the importance of addressing this long term and having some concrete ideas for how to move each one of these pillars up and to the right. Lawyers love concrete, clearly laid out, data-driven arguments. Make the case in each of these areas of client experience that you have an opportunity to improve it and how that improvement will help you.
And so with that, we're going to encourage you, before we move to Q&A, to think about 3 concrete ways you may be able to help your firm move towards great law. And in doing so, what does this look like relative to your best case opportunity? So for some of you, it might be in the space of really rethinking the culture of client experience. So, are you thinking about being before doing and doing before having? For others of you, this may be paying careful attention to some of that data that we've shared with you, whether it's the BTI results or the HBR consulting, using that data to spark or start a conversation. For some of you, one of your takeaways might be engaging in a triple bottom line conversation. Is this a chance for you to expand a point of view, not just about financial profit or client profit, but how do we look at the profitability of our organization or talent? Are we the space where the most talented, the best and brightest want to work? And are we engaging in inspired leadership development for greater community impact or community involvement? For many of you, the 6 pillars of client experience may be a practical way to start. So as you're thinking about authentic relationships, what might you do to elevate your relationship investment? Maybe operationalizing the 3 N's to really serve your clients in a way that matches and meets them where their preferences are. In other spaces, it may be business counsel, actually teaching your lawyers how to be lawsultants with understanding the business consulting or the management consulting and the legal service as it intersects. Third, are you thinking about your communication systems? Are you rechecking in regarding client preferences? And to that end, are you operationalizing your thoughtfulness with client appreciation? Perhaps we've shared a tactic or an insight that you can institutionalize in a way that's more meaningful, particularly as it relates to shared service and engaging your clients in your pro bono efforts. For some, this is really about elevating your experience around client feedback and looking for opportunities to be appreciative in your approach and institutionalizing that early and often. And finally, maybe we've given you an insight on billing and fee care. So with that, we're going to transition now to some questions. And through that, close with some thoughts to get you out at the prescribed and appointed time at 5 minutes to the hour. So let's begin. If you haven't yet typed in your questions, please feel free to do so, and Jim and I will take as many of these as we can with our time remaining.
Great. Thank you so much, Jim and Deb. Great insights. We do have some questions. I'll kind of run through them, and we'll be watching the chat page. As a reminder, if we don't get to your question, we will follow up with you directly. So the first one kind of comes on the cadence that to address these ideas of being a great law firm. So it sounds like there are firm management culture and individual lawyer skill issues that all impact being a great law firm. In what order would you recommend they be addressed?
It's a terrific question.
Great question.
So we're going to give you a great consultant's answer. Well, it depends.
Right.
And so I would say that clearly, as you're beginning to engage lawyers in some individual awakening of their particular skills and their capabilities, again, through your training and coaching efforts that you're engaging, and really awakening lawyers to the range of additional things that they control or can control through client experience, is often a fantastic way to start to create the being or the behavior of a great law lawyer in the space of collectively or collaboratively looking at what it means to them to be a great law group or a great law practice group or a great law firm. So I would say there's a strong argument to awaken that great law insight at the individual level. I know, Jim, though, you've had some experience with firm management, so maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
The reason we say it depends, I've gone into firms where the managing partner looks at me and says, I want to do this better. I want us to be this. I want us to be that. And you embrace that and welcome it. But in almost every case I've seen, I agree 100% with Deb. If you work hard on the individual skills and attitudes, that starts to demonstrate results and can actually lead management to be more willing to change.
And further to that, I think one of the ways we're seeing in-house marketers, in-house professional development professionals, in-house pricing experts, by starting a conversation and demonstrating an awareness using data with firm management will often awaken curiosity that may allow you to take some pilot testing or pilot focus, whether it's a key client experience plan or beginning to inventory or operationalize more thoughtfulness in the delivery of legal service. Sometimes awakening firm management through curiosity and data might be also a great space to start as a follow-on. Next question, Rachel.
Great. So this one is about operationalizing the process. So how do you operationalize a firm-wide process that's scalable when you have many attorneys and you need them to follow through on their business development plans or doing those steps in the firm's desired client experience, like what that firm wants that client experience to feel like, when you only have a handful of managers to nudge them? How do you scale and operationalize?
Well, you added a piece of information there that made me sad. You don't have perhaps enough internal support. I was going to say one of the things I've seen work is to truly train and invest your marketing and business development team in the process so that they can sustain coaching, they can sustain follow-up and help create accountability around an individual business plan, a practice group business plan. To the extent that you don't have that on your own team, then look at the resources within each practice group. Are there people who support the practice group who could play a greater role in helping to sustain the change and the behaviors and the operational changes you want to see? So I think part of it is just looking for the right internal resources. The other is creating accountabilities. I mean, if in fact a firm says we want you to spend 100 hours of non-billable time a year on the top 5 clients in client care and no one ever looks at it, you won't sustain it. We looked at that at several of my firms after the idea came up that it was an important aspect of it was something we should measure. The lawyers actually did. They started recording their non-billable time and doing the right things. So both people and processes can help sustain it, but there has to be accountability. If there's not, it will struggle.
I'll just add to that, as an in-house professional, one of the ways that you can spark more engagement or buy-in is by introducing a framework or a rubric. And so many of our clients will use the 6 pillars as the operating or operationalizing orientation. And we've got one client in particular who has seen tremendous growth in engagement by offering or facilitating her key practice groups through the development of client experience roadmaps. And they simply use those 6 pillars to identify and proactively plan at least one proactive investment in each of the 6 categories. Paired with that, not only is the investment hours, but a very positive way to operationalize this is to be insistent on spending money on your clients. So instead of celebrating the budget savings for client experience, it's actually celebrating that we're spending our client experience allocations. And insofar as the investment hours get tracked and celebrated, also the investment dollars get tracked and celebrated. And using a framework or a rubric like the 6 pillars can give you then a way to facilitate consistent orientation around these key principles.
Great. We have a couple of questions that have come in about getting buy-in. So David and Cheryl, I'm going to sort of combine your questions here. What tips, Deb and Jim, do you have for helping to change that entrenched culture of the firm that is not progressive? And in addition, where can the people that are on the line find some proof or statistics to get that buy-in and get the team on board focusing on this? So how do you get buy-in? And then also, is there any information that you can share or point them to that could be useful to show how these strategies that you've been talking about today have actually grown business?
Absolutely. So again, wanting to be respectful for the time, and David and Cheryl, you couldn't have asked a better set of questions to wrap us up for today. A few insights around how the human brain makes a buying decision. So the first insight, human beings make a buying decision first based on their emotional connectivity, and then they justify rationally. So if you want to elevate buy-in in your firm, we encourage you to get really curious and interested about what the lawyer or practice is trying to achieve so that you can then demonstrate rational insights to make the trust building and the emotional connection a high priority, which means we have to build authentic relationships with our stakeholders in order to see them buy or buy into something. Number 2, there are 4 triggers that get a person to buy into something. The first trigger is they have a known concern. So if you can engage your workforce and know who has the known business development or client development challenges or problems, they're going to be more receptive and willing because they have a known concern. But in some cases, that concern may not be enough of a burning bridge to inspire action. So there are 3 other C's that you can use. If concern is not present, triggering someone's curiosity, triggering someone's interest or desire for more confidence, and lastly, triggering someone's interest around connection. Curiosity, confidence, and connection can often trigger a buying behavior, a buying-in behavior, when you share a story about a success that's happened elsewhere in the firm, or you share a piece of data that indicates that someone else has already implemented the strategy or tactic that you're inviting. Human beings are growing in their anxiety around fear of missing out. So FOMO is something that you can tap into for purposes of buying in. And ultimately, when it comes to confidence and connection, people love to be associated with winning and winners. And so we highly encourage you all, if you are not actively engaging in the latest research, many of the sites and sources that we've highlighted today are great spaces to continue to find new avenues for buying in. We also recommend some of our favorite authors. Dan Pink wrote a great book on motivation called Drive. Patrick Lencioni is coming out with another book that's a build on his 5 dysfunctions of a team, which is really focusing on 5 strategies for great teaming. We're huge fans of Adam Grant. He wrote a great book on give and take. And so making yourself schooled in the areas of social insight and social science is a great way to facilitate opportunities for buying and buying in.
And what's interesting is that Deb just gave a brilliant and sophisticated answer that I just loved. And what I would have said is it's very often a dripping process. And this has resonated with some people I've talked to in the past, so I'll just share the idea of drip, drip, drip. If you can share a critical article that shows data around your firm, a firm like yours, and the metrics that are being looked at and improved, if you can share the impact of client interviews, etc., one drip at a time, just keep feeding the right information to the people who matter and let them suddenly realize this matters.
Great. That sounds like a great way to end it, Jim. Jim and Deb, thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for asking questions. There were some that we weren't able to get to. As promised, we'll have Jim and Deb follow up with you directly. Thank you for joining us for the webinar. Look for the email with the slides and the recording, and have a great day.